When the dust had settled and the bodies of those caught in the blast were removed, the Foundation was faced with a grim realization. They had a new adversary. It seemed to be a new group of interest, one with seemingly enough resources and tenacity to enact violence against one of their containment facilities. They had caught the Foundation off guard and claimed the lives of many personnel in the process. The initial response was outrage, but even the O5 Council stayed their wrathful hand. A protracted war with an unidentified group was hardly a viable course of action. Instead, an investigation into the organization was launched, looking into the group calling themselves Death to the Enemy. Though the Foundation didn't yet realize it, what they had stumbled onto wasn't a new group of interest, but an entirely undiscovered anomaly, SCP-5636. This is the designation given to an anomalous viral psychological condition, one that appears to be capable of altering the minds of susceptible subjects, permanently altering them. Subjects who experience the effects of SCP-5636 are designated as instances of SCP-5636-A. The effects of this anomalous mental condition appear to manifest as radical changes to the fundamental beliefs a person holds, observed through any extreme and unexpected shifts in their political, social, and religious views. Those who have contracted SCP-5636 tend to orient this change in their viewpoints around committing themselves to the outright extermination of other existing groups that they used to be affiliated with. An example commonly cited by Foundation researchers is a hypothetical person who grew up as a part of the Girl Scouts of America and became the leader of a troop as an adult. After becoming an instance of SCP-5636-A, they vowed to personally destroy every Girl Scout in the world. SCP-5636 appears to be less likely to infect those selling cookies as part of a community organization, however. The pattern of infection seems to primarily affect anyone who is a member of a large-scale religious organization, influential political parties, and smaller clandestine movements. Attacks against the SCP Foundation by SCP-5636 infectees did not come from outside the Foundation, but within it. On 2 separate occasions, there have been outbreaks of radicalization among personnel, wherein contracting SCP-5636 has caused staff members to become violently opposed to the Foundation and its mission to secure and contain anomalous entities. When a person becomes an instance of SCP-5636-A, their infection typically presents itself in specific behaviors that center around 2 distinct primary objectives. The subject will first feel compelled to pursue the goal of causing as much damage to their existing community. In the case of infected Foundation staff, this might take the form of attempting to orchestrate a containment breach of an anomaly in order to spread chaos and destruction. The infected individual's secondary objective is to spread their radicalization to others within the same community or organization they are a part of. The aim is to convince more people to assist them in destroying said group. In the vast majority of cases involving SCP-5636, those who have contracted the anomalous condition have been caught planning to carry out large-scale terror attacks, or in more extreme cases, really enacting such atrocities, usually at the cost of several violent deaths. When SCP-5636 outbreaks have occurred within the Foundation, personnel casualties are often considered negligible losses by the O5 Council. However, infections have at least had the additional benefit of providing researchers with live instances of SCP-5636-A, whose differences in beliefs and behavior can be closely observed and compared with their pre-existing personnel records. Those who were found enacting terroristic plots against the Foundation from within its ranks and other SCP-5636-A infectees have been detained and questioned by Foundation security teams. During interviews, another commonality between infectees presented itself: the assertion that their radicalization didn't come from any anomalous psychological illness, but from a covert religious and political terrorist group. The most common name for this group is given in Arabic, Almat Lado, which directly translates to the phrase, "Death to the Enemy" in English. The eponymous enemy is not specified in the group's name, but is usually given as whichever organization an infectee formerly belonged to and fixes their aggression on. Foundation researchers have noted that, though Arabic is the liturgical language of the Islamic faith, the beliefs of this supposed anomalous organization do not reflect those of traditional Islam at all, nor any other known religious belief system. They do not even match the religious and social beliefs of smaller, more radical fringe sects. While the organization's name is commonly given in Arabic, other instances of SCP-5636-A have cited it in various languages, including Aramaic, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Latin, Ancient Greek, Spanish, French, Urdu, Japanese, Xhosa, Fey, and English. The language the group's name is given in by infectees does not correlate with the languages spoken by these radicalized individuals. Someone who has contracted SCP-5636 is more likely to give the name of death to the enemy in a language they don't speak than one they do. When interviewed by Foundation interrogation specialists, SCP-5636-A instances are able to coherently describe the process of their own infection, and commonly describe becoming radicalized through the internet. Given their testimony, the Foundation has been led to believe that SCP-5636 primarily transmits through online exposure. However, it does so through a variety of different means. Many have described their radicalization occurring through social media, online message boards, and forums, including Reddit, 4chan, Tumblr, and Facebook. Others seem to become exposed to the anomalous infection through direct private messaging services like WhatsApp, text messages, or emails. Though there are certain cases of infectees being radicalized by the delivery of physical postal mail. In one case, someone became an instance of SCP-5636-A after experiencing a prophetic vision in a dream. Given that instances of SCP-5636-A all independently identified death to the enemy as the organization responsible for their radicalization, the Foundation began an active, wide-scale search for the organization itself. Attempts were made to uncover any information possible about the terrorist group, including the names, alias, and last known location of anyone affiliated with them, beyond SCP-5636 infectees. However, despite the Foundation's extensive resources, no evidence of any affiliated persons or documents regarding the group existed anywhere in the public record, and there were scarcely any trace of them online. Assuming this organization had used some anomalous means to cover their tracks, private information exchanges took place between the Foundation and several national governments. Details of vital SCP containment operations were divulged at the discretion of elected officials, in exchange for any information about death to the enemy. Nobody knew anything about them. The only mentions of the terrorist group and their activity existed within the Foundation's own files, created after the discovery of SCP-5636-A instances themselves. It quickly became apparent that there did not appear to be an existing terror organization operating under any variation of the name Death to the Enemy. As such, an internal application to designate them as a group of interest remained in a perpetual unapproved state, until the Foundation uncovered irrefutable proof that Death to the Enemy actually existed. Researchers soon realized that they weren't dealing with an anomalous terrorist faction, but terroristic actions as the symptom of an anomalous viral condition. So the focus shifted from finding Death to the Enemy to examining and potentially treating those affected by SCP-5636. Captured instances of SCP-5636-A were submitted to full medical examination, including detailed brain scans, which produced imagery indicating highly suspicious activity was occurring within affected subjects' brains. Foundation researchers discovered the presence of an anomalous foreign substance, subsequently classified as SCP-5636-B. This appeared to resemble generic human gray matter, but possessed two notable differences. The first was that this substance contained high traces of sodium nitrate, a versatile chemical commonly found in products like artificial fertilizers, food preservatives, glass, and even explosives. Foundation researchers are yet to ascertain how this chemical compound manifests within infectees upon contracting SCP-5636, or how the presence of harmful industrial chemicals in their brains doesn't result in significant cerebral tissue damage or outright kill them. Though arguably more alarming was that the second noted property of this unknown substance, it appeared to be sentient. Upon examining samples of this unknown gray matter resembling substance, researchers discovered it exhibited behavior that seemed to suggest it was capable of sentient activity, at least to some degree. SCP-5636-B possessed clump cells that could shift through the liquid with high concentrations of sodium nitrate. It seemed that the substance itself was able to avoid medical analysis instruments in a way that the Foundation Biology Department concluded meant it was somehow intelligent. What remained unclear was how SCP-5636-B could sense these implements, and understanding this substance's anomalous properties has since become a priority of ongoing research. The presence of this SCP-5636-B substance in infected subjects and the lack of evidence surrounding the existence of a terror group called Death to the Enemy was enough for the Foundation to classify SCP-5636 as an anomalous phenomena. Further investigations were made into the exact impact of this radicalizing condition on SCP-5636-A infectees. Cross-examination of various interrogation video recordings, written testimonials, and audio logs detailing their beliefs seem to indicate that the ideologies of SCP-5636-A instances weren't necessarily aligned with each other. Instead, their radicalized beliefs would vary largely dependent on the circumstances of their individual lives prior to infection. They would all ultimately exhibit the same loss of conviction towards whatever organization that they were previously a part of. Foundation experts tried to convince instances of SCP-5636-A that they should mend their broken connections with their specific groups. However, none could be deterred from the idea that their former organization needed to be permanently eradicated, or that the only way to do so was through significant violence and bloodshed. While the targets of their anomalously altered ideologies would differ, all subjects infected with SCP-5636 exhibited a similar behavioral shift when it came to how they communicated their disdain for their targets. Even those who were, prior to infection, known by their peers to be quiet and reserved, would erupt into long, rambling monologues exposing their hatred of their former organizations. Parapsychology researchers noted that SCP-5636-A instances delivered monologues clearly meant to convince others that the targeted organization posed a serious threat to society or to humanity itself. However, none of the positions taken by infectees actually rely on real, factual information about their targeted organization. There's plenty to criticize the SCP Foundation for, but the instances of SCP-5636-A who were former members of personnel had nothing to say of the ethics of the Foundation's near-limitless resources and reach. Instead, any of the individuals that have contracted SCP-5636 will rely on esoteric, abstract language that paints their target as harmful to the soul of humanity. Many have been recorded during interrogations listing connections between relatively harmless organizations with entirely fabricated places, dangerous individuals, and other groups that outright do not exist. The ideology of the fictionalized Death to the Enemy terrorist group that infected individuals align themselves with seems purely based on entirely fictional information, fanciful language, and false statements. Experts within the field of non-biological anomalous contagions began to speculate that SCP-5636 could contain a mimetic component in its spread. Several key phrases seem to crop up again and again in the notes and writings of the infected. The name of Death to the Enemy is notably vague, not specifying any ideology other than destruction and violence. Much of the radical stances conveyed by SCP-5636-A instances follow this same pattern. Other than the consistently negative characterization of their targeted organization, the goals expressed by those infected are similarly vague and ill-defined, if stated at all. Most of these writings match the verbal expressions made by captured instances of SCP-5636-A. Their actions are an attempt to cleanse the soul of humanity, calling their targets malignant or tumorous, and that these organizations need to be digested or consumed so that society can flourish. There's another commonality, one that lends credence to the idea that SCP-5636 is perhaps partially a form of mimetic infection. Alongside the notes of several SCP-5636-A infectees, Foundation researchers have discovered a hexagram symbol that often holds some significance within the traditions of witchcraft and the Wiccan religion. The symbol itself is often used to denote dark magic, or in some cases, even represent or invoke the influence of the devil. When questioned on their choice to use this specific hexagram, SCP-5636-A instances are consistently evasive, reluctant to comment on the significance of the symbol. The SCP Foundation is not the only organization known to have been targeted by SCP-5636-induced attacks. Among the other groups and institutions to have suffered severe casualties from instances of SCP-5636-A are a Hasidic Jewish synagogue, 2 Islamic mosques of varying denominations, the Catholic Church, the Utah Republican Party, a convent of Tibetan Buddhist monks, the Pirate Party of Sweden, and the Church of the Broken God. It's also suspected, though not confirmed, that SCP-5636-A instances have also attacked the Central Intelligence Agency, the Communist Party of China, the anomalous art collective Are We Cool Yet?, and a parent-teacher association from St. Ives, England. Methods of attack have ranged from bombings, arson, and attempted violent insurrections to orchestrating a disease epidemic, poisoning members of a targeted organization, and the attempted assassination of U.S. Senators for Utah, Orrin Hatch and Mike Lee. However, by far the most devastating attack of an SCP-5636 infected individual was that which occurred on April 30, 2020, against the SCP Foundation. Incident 5636-11 was enacted when Ethics Overseer Michael Calvin became an instance of SCP-5636-A. In his role within the Foundation, Ethics Director Calvin was responsible for all personnel admissions into the Ethics Committee, having been awarded the role in large part thanks to his seniority within that arm of the Foundation. Having become anomalously radicalized by SCP-5636 infection, Calvin then set about converting his fellow members of the committee into similar instances to himself. After Calvin had converted around half of the personnel within the Ethics Committee, the resultant group of SCP-5636-A instances enacted a coup, staged at the Mill Building of Site-37, the typically convening site for the committee. Any remaining Ethics Committee who had not yet been converted were killed during this takeover, though this was only the initial phase of their attack. The attack strategy devised by Ethics Director Calvin relied on a weapon that even the Foundation had no procedures for: bureaucracy. Shortly after the coup, various Foundation sites began reporting that they had received a direct order from the Ethics Committee. In the disseminated order, Calvin and his fellow SCP-5636-A instances objected to the holding of all contained SCPs and demanded their immediate release on the grounds that the containment of these anomalies constituted a violation of ethical conduct. It's worth noting that during this initial attack, the Foundation's existing file detailing the SCP-5636 infection had been wiped from the database. This was thanks to Calvin using the Ethics Committee's special bureaucratic powers as part of his attack, though they didn't just remove mentions of SCP-5636. The SCP Foundation's Ethics Committee has the ability to restrict suspended persons from accessing the Foundation database. Using these permissions, the converted members of the Ethics Committee were able to block access to the database for all Foundation personnel, simultaneously preventing any members of staff from logging into the system. While a majority of the Foundation sites that Calvin had ordered to release their anomalies refused the order from the Ethics Committee, 6 facilities complied and set several SCPs free from their containment. O5 Council Member O5-3 was able to restore Foundation-wide access to the database, using their executive powers to overturn the decision of the infected Ethics Committee. However, by the time that the freed anomalies were recontained, more than 2,000 people had died, with more than half of the death toll being civilian casualties. In the wake of the Foundation's second attack from SCP-5636, and the most severe death-to-the-enemy attack ever recorded, Containment Order 5636-05-3 was issued. This proposed new special containment procedures intended to curb any further spread of the radicalizing condition and ways to better prepare for and react to outbreaks. The O5 Council voted unanimously in favor of the proposal, though several took the opportunity to speculate on the exact nature of SCP-5636. In a memo, O5-2 asserted that death to the enemy could very well have been real, an anomalous terrorist group that was somehow keeping itself hidden from view, rather than being non-existent. The council person insisted that the Foundation continue relentlessly searching for this organization until all possible methods had been exhausted. They believed that death to the enemy, if they truly existed, might hold ties to the Chaos Insurgency, longtime adversaries of the Foundation. O5-2 seemed to believe that there could be some collusion between the two groups and proposed sending an undercover operative into the field to investigate. The council person also noted the symbol used by infectees of SCP-5636, the hexagram, that they were aware was a symbol associated with the ritual practices of those partaking in pagan witchcraft. There was some suspicion that SCP-5636 might have some as-of-yet undiscovered ties to the supernatural and arcane. Other members of the council weighed in, with some believing the radicalizing anomalous infections of SCP-5636 to be cognito-hazardous in nature. It was speculated that the hazardous radical thoughts could stimulate the growth of SCP-5636-B, the anomalous gray matter. While other cognito-hazardous anomalies didn't typically result in physical symptoms, there seemed to be few other ways to classify SCP-5636. As a result of passing Containment Order 5636-05-3, 3 remote server banks were established at SCP Foundation Black sites, locations codenamed Babylon, Constantinople, and Carthage. Each server was connected to a remote power supply, allowing them to continue operation without interruption, with any disruption to their function to be treated with the utmost severity. In this case, all 3 would require inspection by trusted Foundation engineers. The role of all 3 servers is to monitor all online databases, forums, and even the Foundation's own internal servers for any phrases, symbols, or trigger words associated with SCP-5636, Death to the Enemy, or any previously infected individual. A neuro-linguistic program would then be deployed to determine if the instance was evident of a new SCP-5636-A infectee. In the event that the program is able to conclude that someone new has contracted the radicalizing condition, several mobile task forces are to be dispatched in response. MTF Kappa-10, also known under the codename Skynet, are tasked with scrubbing any online presence associated with SCP-5636. Meanwhile, MTF Pi-1, the so-called City Slickers, will track down, detain, and apprehend any potential infectees. If an instance of SCP-5636-A is ever again found to be a member of personnel working within any level of the SCP Foundation, then Mobile Task Force Epsilon-11, Nine-Tailed Fox, and MTF Rho-9 Technical Support will be deployed instead. Should anyone within the Foundation suffer an infection of SCP-5636, the suspected employee is to have all security clearances immediately revoked until internal investigations can determine whether they remain loyal to the Foundation or if they believe in death to the enemy. Now check out SCP-8001, The Edge of the World, and SCP-001, Dark Truth About the O5 Council for more.